In the medieval world, fear wasn't just in the heart, it was in the very air. Life was shadowed by the spectre of disease, where every cough threatened judgment, and superstitions carved the world into signs and omens. Here death lingered in whispers, echoing through dirt lanes and stone churches, where sermons offered vivid, macabre visions of hellfire and eternal torment. The scent of incense mingled with the stench of sickness, marking souls as sinners or saints. As the black-cloaked figures of the Black Death claimed lives indiscriminately, belief in the tangible presence of Satan was as real as the cold earth underfoot. Embark on a journey into the shadows of the medieval era, where fear was as pervasive as the air they breathed. Life then was a relentless confrontation with disease, divine judgment, and an unpredictable afterlife. For those who lived centuries ago, fear shaped every aspect of existence. It wasn't something abstract but profoundly tangible, fueled by the ever-present threats of disease and famine. These harsh realities forged a heightened awareness of mortality, with every natural disaster perceived as a divine test or punishment. Disease was a formidable spectre, an ever-present threat that haunted the lives of medieval people. Lacking an understanding of germ theory, disease was often attributed to malevolent forces, or as a manifestation of divine wrath. The frequent outbreaks of illness, accompanied by horrifying mortality rates, fostered a pervasive fear that left no corner of society untouched. The plague was particularly terrifying, indiscriminately decimating populations and leaving behind a trail of desolation, fear, and grief. In this world, a fevered brow or a fit of coughing was seen as a potential precursor to death, stirring visions of an afterlife teetering between heaven and hell. The Church, wielding immense power, dominated every facet of medieval life, reinforcing the omnipresence of divine judgment. Every word, thought, and deed was scrutinized through a lens of potential sin, with the unshriven heavily burdened by the weight of their conscience. This incessant dread of divine judgment was a constant refrain in the sermons and art of the time. From Dante's vivid depictions of hell's torments in The Inferno to grotesque hellscapes painted in churches, the message was clear. Life was a test, and eternal fate hung in the balance. This fear of divine wrath was a powerful deterrent and an essential part of spiritual life, compelling individuals to navigate their existence with acute awareness of their spiritual destinies. Superstition intertwined with daily life, offering people a semblance of control over the capricious world they inhabited. Charms, talismans, and rituals were not mere folklore, but considered essential protections against the unseen forces constantly perceived as lurking. These beliefs dictated every aspect of life, turning omens and portents into critical elements of decision-making. For many, the rustle of a raven's wings or the sudden crack of thunder could spell disaster. The Church was both a refuge and a reminder of sin's perils. Religion pervaded every aspect of life, with the threat of eternal damnation ever looming. Yet it also provided redemption, with sacraments and rites offering hope and a pathway to absolution. This duality of fear and faith was central to the medieval psyche, with fear palpable, yet balanced by the promise of salvation. In death, fear took on a new form. The afterlife loomed as a realm filled with potential horror or holiness. Medieval people lived with a deep awareness of their soul's fate, spurred by doctrines that painted purgatory as a place of relentless suffering. Thoughtful preparation for this transition was crucial, involving spiritual readiness and intricate legal and ceremonial rites. Burial customs were bound by this fear of the afterlife. Communities were so consumed by ensuring safe passage for the deceased that it instilled a reverence for mortality that dominated life. Such customs reflected a fusion of dread, piety, and societal obligation, showcasing the intricate blend of fear and spirituality that characterized medieval existence. Curses and blessings were potent forces believed to shape destinies. Curses were viewed as destructively real, while blessings were coveted. In a world blurred between the natural and the supernatural, these elements held powerful, tangible influences over personal and communal life. Charms and curses became instruments of divine favour or retribution, impacting relationships and social structures. The physical landscape itself emitted a sense of fear and reverence. Dark forests and isolated hills were viewed as domains of sinister forces, while sacred sites like churches stood as gateways to divine power. The presence of gargoyles and crypts in religious structures served dual reminders of mortality and religious devotion. The medieval built environment thus embodied a convergence of sanctuary and foreboding. Imagination added another layer to their fears. Supernatural creatures like griffins and dragons roamed both within stories and their collective psyche. These beasts served as metaphors for life's unpredictability, their place in bestiaries cementing them within the medieval consciousness as symbols of moral lessons. As we peel back the layers of medieval fears, their enduring legacy becomes evident. While much was born of ignorance and hardship, echoes of these fears continue to reverberate. Even today, themes of divine judgment, existential dread, and moral consequence remain, reminding us that despite progress, some fears are timeless. This historical tapestry invites us to engage with the shared human voyage through fear and hope, bridging past and present through experiences bound by mortality. Medieval fears stand as a mirror, reflecting our shared mortality and intricately linked destinies across time. In the mid-14th century, a shadow fell over Europe. It began innocuously enough, as trading ships crested the waves toward bustling Italian ports. But they brought with them an unwelcome guest, the Black Death. This disease knew no boundaries, ravaging both the humble and the highborn, leaving behind empty markets and echoes of bustling streets, now haunted by whispers of dread and the pitiful cries of the afflicted. Scholars and chroniclers of the time, their minds steeped in tradition and beliefs, grasped for understanding but could only point to a darkness that defied comprehension, suggesting in grim consensus that Europe had come under siege by forces beyond sight or ken. In a landscape already painted with fear, theories flourished. Some believed the scourge to be divine wrath unleashed for sins unconfessed, while others whispered of deadly miasmas drifting through the streets unseen. Fear fed superstition, creating a cycle of paranoia that split tightly knit communities into islands of isolation, each seeking to fend off an enemy they couldn't see. Ironically, as individuals prayed for collective salvation, division crept in, manifesting humanity's enduring struggle against the unknown. Travelling along trade routes, the plague wove itself into the fabric of Europe with formidable speed, borne by merchants and pilgrims alike. Towns became grim milestones in its journey, each a waypoint marked by shadows and silence. The contagion respected no boundaries, neither walls nor social status halting its grim advance. Lives, economies, and communities crumbled under its inexorable weight, transforming bustling centres into ghost towns and once thriving fields into barren soil. With the plague's devastation rose a strange mix of despair and newfound liberty. Survivors, having witnessed societal orders erode, embraced moments of unprecedented egalitarianism as entrenched hierarchies struggled to retain control in this new, uncertain dawn. The symptoms of the Black Death were a living nightmare. Buboes, swollen and blackened, heralded the onset of death. The pneumonic form spread silently, allowing no defence or respite. The septicemic variant, quick and final, left its victims little time to reckon with their mortality. Caregivers became victims as the disease galloped through their ranks, overwhelming rudimentary healthcare systems, and leaving mere mortals crafting prayers out of a fear-heavy silence, against a backdrop of unrelenting grief and flickering holy flames. Faced with the onslaught of pestilence, desperate measures emerged. Flagellants paraded through streets, self-inflicting pain in hopes of divine appeasement. Crowds gathered, both curious and devout, seeking hope in rituals as strange as they were sincere. Not all sought salvation through suffering. Many clung to protective charms or the mysteries of pagan rites to shield their homes and hearts from the invisible threat. In the midst of the plague's chill, an unfamiliar quiet seeped into society's fabric. Vibrant lives gave way to forlorn silences, familiarity eroded by suspicion and fear of contagion. Established hierarchies faltered as labourers gained unexpected influence, hastening feudalism's gradual decline. It became clear that even within devastation lay catalysts for change, nudging society toward a less rigid, albeit tumultuous future. Religion, once a bastion of certainty, struggled under the weight of faith shaken. Clerics, themselves fallen to the pestilence, left congregations bereft and questioning. Yet faith did not vanish. Rather, it shifted, transforming from collective worship into personal spiritual quests. New movements blended old doctrines with fresh visions of salvation, challenging the church to adapt or risk obsolescence. Irony thrived in the plague's wake, blurring lines between saints and sinners. Undeserved fortunes and unpunished sins became tales of fate's indifference and divine aloofness. Soldiers returning victorious bore the flag of death, highlighting battles both tangible and spiritual. Despite its ravages, the plague became an unlikely agent of change, pressing reset on social dynamics, as society grappled with notions of worth, survival, and redemption. Artists with brushes draped in shadows captured the dance macabre, recording life's transience in chilling detail. Despite despair's dominance, expressions of beauty amidst decay spoke to resilience. This artistic record became both lament and defiance, a ceremonial reflection of humanity's dual capacity for bitterness and hope, forging connections between mortality's shadow and resilience's light. The Black Death's echoes lingered long after its last wave retreated, a grim tutor whispering lessons of adaptation and rebirth. Change took root from its ashes, accelerating shifts in social, economic, and medical spheres. The plague cautioned and compelled, ushering in opportunities disguised as devastation, nurturing new branches of thought unshackled by tradition, hinting at vistas beyond mere survival. In the end, where the Reaper retreated, humankind stood on transformed grounds, reconciling with mortality's terms. Humanity acknowledged shadows that yet lingered, and from this solemn acceptance, it crafted futures alive with grace and tenacity, sowing seeds for a new chapter, born from the twilight of a world both ended and remade. In the medieval world, the devil wasn't just an abstract symbol of evil. He was as tangible as the stones beneath one's feet, every bit as menacing as any physical threat. Sermons painted him as a sinister force, lurking just beyond the edges of everyday life, his whispering influence entangling the mundane in webs of sin and damnation. Superstition and paranoia flourished under the clergy's watchful gaze, seeing Satan's hand in every misfortune, from failed crops to household illnesses. Children grew up on cautionary tales, not of gentle fairy tales, but of Satan's insidious ways, their innocence tethered by tales of temptation's dangers, even in the guise of unattended toys or candy. Adulthood only deepened these fears, where each decision was a potential gateway for demonic influence. The enduring thread spun by the church convinced society that wickedness wasn't inner turmoil, but an external threat prowling the earth. Witches, too, embodied this fear, scapegoats for calamities no one could explain. Bound by alleged pacts with Satan, they personified dark power, victims of trials that brimmed with spectacle and torture. Prosecutions forced confessions through duress, asserting witches as Satan's earthly emissaries, spreading chaos in an already turbulent world. Heretics fared no better. Questioning the church's teachings branded individuals as allies of Satan, challenging societal beliefs that anchored communities. The notion that Satan whispered new truths threatened to fracture God's church. Heresy trials mirrored witch accusations, public displays reinforcing the church's dominance over chaos through fear and punishment. Those who observed learned dissent equaled darkness, watched as public retribution reaffirmed communal submission and order. Dreams were another battleground, where believers feared demons' warped visions to lead them astray, whispering unspeakable sins through cryptic nighttime symbolism. Dreamers questioned their purity upon waking, as the nighttime realm blurred boundaries between the real and divine. The church cautioned against relying on dreams, presentations of spiritual warfare intended to lure them from righteous paths. Vigilance against these manipulations seeped into waking hours, with crucifixes, charms, and prayers safeguarding against threats in slumber. Demonic possession, too, transcended modern explanations of psychological disturbance, offering terrifying insights where the devil might seize control of a person's being. Such episodes terrified onlookers, reinforcing Satan's imminent danger through uncontrollable fits or supernatural strength. Communities demanded church intervention, resulting in exorcism rituals depicted as spiritual battles of good versus evil. These practices dramatized the belief that the devil's grasp could find anyone, reinforcing eternal vigilance and faith's necessity. Artifacts played crucial roles in this cosmic struggle between divine and diabolical forces. Relics, believed to possess holy virtues, safeguarded communities, drawing crowds to churches to bask in their protective aura. Relics claimed to channel divine strength, promising aid against sickness, misfortune, and demonic affliction. While relics bore legitimacy, amulets and talismans often lay outside church approval. Their personal shields against darkness carried quietly amidst pervasive fears. Art and literature infused cultural psychology with fear. Churches adorned with scenes of damned souls under torment. Hellmouths, iconic, terrifying jaws, offered glimpses of infernal destiny awaiting the unrighteous, underscoring sermons about eternal peril. Artists shaped the medieval imagination, acting as visual witnesses to the eternal struggle of salvation versus damnation. Literature carried similar weight, tales replete with demonic challenges and temptations echoing real-world concerns. These narratives were designed to intrigue and educate, ensuring the devil's vivid, pervasive presence within every medieval mindset. Even festivals reflected the eternal struggle, moments of respite from fear. Events like All Hallows' Eve inverted societal order with vibrant symbolism, temporarily confusing malevolent spirits. Processions of penitents followed, serious public religious rites imploring divine intervention against perceived satanic influence in hardships. These acts declared allegiance to God's light amidst desperation, channeling communal anxiety into ritual, reaffirming resistance to darkness. Class lines further defined how medieval society grappled with Satan's influence. For nobility, demonic manipulation threatened court intrigue, prompting donations to monasteries or commissioning holy works as spiritual redress for indulgences. These actions signified genuine faith and shrewd political moves, demonstrating leadership's piatular acts amid divine judgment fears. For peasants focused on immediate survival, supernatural forces explained farm calamities or personal misfortunes, invoking saints through laborious rituals bound to the seasons. Parables and teachings brought these fears vividly home, illustrating Satan's schemes through Christ's temptations as literal duels with darkness. Such allegories taught resilience. Promoting vigilance amidst adversity through morality plays dramatizing sin and redemption. Spiritual armaments equipped believers, ensuring vivid theological lessons ingrained deeply into conscience, facing an ever-present threat of straying from salvation's path. Despite fear's heavy shadow, medieval society remained resilient against Satan's influence. Rituals, prayers, and penance forged community resolve, casting spiritual nets wide to guard against the infernal. Communal structures reinforced this stance. Stories of resistance wound with collective strength against cosmic paranoia. The faithful bore witness to heaven's promise amidst hell's threat, fear intertwining with hope for eventual salvation and divine mercy through the ceaseless dance of history's spiritual narrative. In the medieval world, words were far more than mere sounds. They were threads in the tapestry of reality, capable of binding communities or unravelling them altogether. Whispered gossip wasn't harmless chatter. It was the sin that seeped into the soul, staining it. The church loomed over such transgressions, reminding all that slander was a breach of love for one's neighbour and risked incurring divine wrath. In tight-knit villages where life was an intricate web of dependencies, gossip's allure was both inevitable and perilous. Confession emerged as a crucial ritual, an essential balm for those caught in the cycle of sin and penance. While offering spiritual relief, it paradoxically allowed the church to entrench its control over the faithful. The confessional, a space of supposed secrecy, brimmed with potential for new rumours to be born, each whisper containing the seeds of scandal, reinforcing the cycle of sin and redemption. The church's gaze reached into every corner of medieval existence, as omnipresent as the very air they breathed. Nobles within grand stone fortresses and peasants toiling in mud-shod fields lived beneath the church's all-seeing eye, ensuring that no one's soul was truly their own. This spiritual panopticon created a culture of vigilance, where intentions were as scrutinized as actions. Even fleeting thoughts or wandering glances could invite spiritual censure. This incessant watchfulness bred environments of mutual surveillance, where neighbours monitored each other's conduct in a collective quest for salvation or out of sheer fear of mutual damnation. The confessional thus became a theatre of reconciliation and spectacle, a public acknowledgement of private fault, serving as both deterrent and reminder of the Church's vast influence over mortal life and thoughts alike. The human body, caught between perception as a divine masterpiece and a vessel of sin, added to this intricate web of temptation and virtue. As a constant battleground for spiritual warfare, it bore the indelible marks of original sin. The Church asserted an austere control over bodily desires, dictating behaviour even within the private sanctum of marriage. Acts of intimacy were harnessed for divine purpose, cloaked in ecclesiastical laws to prevent souls from straying into carnal chaos. Saints and ascetics, paragons of purity, reminded the faithful of the ideal that flesh could be transcended, offering tantalizing glimpses of spiritual enlightenment through renunciation. Pride, an echo of Lucifer's downfall, threatened to unravel social fabric and divine order alike. In hierarchical societies, humility was both a virtue and a necessity, curbing ambitions that might challenge celestial order. Yet the grand cathedrals adorned with gold and relics stood as testaments to the complex dance between modesty and magnificence. This contradiction extended into everyday life, where individuals navigated expectations of humility and the temptation of vanity. Ironies abounded, with rituals of repentance and charity offering routes to spiritual health, cleansing pride's shadow from the soul. Wrath was a more volatile fire, its blaze destructive to community and self. Unlike fleeting modern annoyances, medieval wrath conjured visions of demonic possession, threatening to sever the fragile threads of brotherhood binding the social order. Anger's indulgence was a dance with devilry, requiring control and repentance to mend the tears it made in communal harmony. The monastic example offered a roadmap for temperance, illustrating that divine peace could quell even the fiercest flames of rage, knitting community back together with threads of forgiveness and humility. Greed devoured from within, a hunger not for mere wealth, but for the soul's ruin. It was a betrayal of heavenly balance, turning any prosperous farmer or wealthy noble into an idolater. In an age of precarious subsistence, the Church framed charitable acts as visible counters to avarice, sanctifying wealth redistribution as sacred duty. Monasteries emerged as spiritual and financial mediators, their holdings echoing the complex interplay of greed and grace. This environment wove intricate tapestries, balancing material desire with celestial duty. Envy, a silent spectre, gnawed at the bonds of fraternity and the integrity of one's soul. Envy languished in shadow, lurking behind another's joy, poisoning community with its toxic murmurings. Yet, religious teachings offered tools to counter its threat, celebrating gratitude as sacred. Through festive gatherings and collective toil, communities imbibed the ethic of contentment, reaffirming each soul's divine allotment and dispelling envy's darkness. Gluttony stood out starkly in a world marked by hunger, turning abundance into spiritual excess. More than indulgence, it was a symbol of rebellion against nature's scarcity, upsetting social and cosmic balance alike. The Church's answer was fasting, a ritual repurposing hunger for moral purification, reminding all that the act of nourishment itself held ethical weight. Feasting became communal celebration rather than individual indulgence, a delicate equilibrium keeping the spectre of gluttony at bay. Lust, the most visible and vilified sin, laced human relations with perilous allure. Carefully bounded by ecclesiastical law, it was the ever-present shadow play of temptation and redemption, where marriage offered sanctioned sanctuary against eternal flames. The monastic ideal, and the narratives of saints overcoming carnality became testament to the spirit's triumph over the body's desires. This dance of shadows underscored humanity's eternal struggle to reconcile mortal longings with divine allegiance. Finally, confession played a dual role as liberator and captor, unlocking the gates of forgiveness, yet binding souls closer to the Church's sphere. Each penitent act offered the hope of salvation, but underscored the enduring tension between personal repentance and ecclesiastical authority. Confession was a cherished tradition, a ritual steeped in the truths of medieval life, where sin and grace intertwined, shaping an era where the flesh was both the battleground and the prize. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit medieval church, the air heavy with incense as a priest's voice echoes across the stone walls, painting portraits of hell with vivid detail. For those gathered, unversed in scientific rationale and steeped in parables, the preacher's descriptions of eternal flames and sharp stakes impaling sinners for thirst and decadence were real and immediate. These fiery sermons were more than mere words. They became vivid, living nightmares meant to steer souls from the brink of eternal damnation. Even as folly might provoke a smile today, back then, it served a critical role in moral navigation. Artists and theologians conspired to make these visions tangible. Church walls bore frescoes depicting unspeakable torments, worms devouring the eyes of the lustful, sinners submerged in boiling pitch, reinforcing the sermon's grim lessons. The imagery wasn't simply decorative but instructional, resonating with a population largely illiterate. Faces with horrors reflected moral labyrinths, turning religious spaces into haunting galleries of consequence. Within this blend of word and image, the medieval psyche was primed, gripped by both fear and the desperate hope of redemption. Sermons themselves, crafted with both poetic flourish and raw terror, aimed to instill a visceral dread of sin's wages. Fire and brimstone served as the preacher's palette to transform simple gatherings into cathartic immersion. Voices ranged from hushed ominousness to thunderous proclamation, describing the damned flogged by demons or shackled eternally in chains. These depictions were considered unassailable truths, drawing straight lines from apostolic instruction to medieval ear. Yet this fear mixed with hope, for hell was always juxtaposed against the shining salvation of heaven, each path open to individual choice. In the medieval imagination, hell was as cacophonous as it was fiery. The groaning damned, rattling chains and ceaseless screams all formed an unbearable symphony, a metaphor for the soul's inner chaos. Daily sounds, be they the tolling bells or bustling marketplaces, were life's music. Reality of hell's noise resonated with daily experience, rendering it a relatable terror. Gregorian chants contrasted this horror, symbolising a heavenly peace, unreachable by the soul stuck in hell's discord. Hellfire, beyond pure terror, served an educational purpose. Children absorbed tales where innocuous infractions led to infernal punishments, guiding tiny feet along paths deemed righteous. From murals to plays, hell was an educational tool. Fear a component of medieval upbringing as foundational as learning to walk. Society absorbed this narrative, largely unequipped to read but equipped to feel and remember through sensory engagement. These learning methods permeated cultural structures, cementing a worldview where morality, underlined by fear, was taught communally. The devilry of hell was known in disturbing detail. Artists and writers lingered on specifics, indicating sins with tailored punishments, the gluttonous starving eternally, liars drowned in seas of deceit. This deep personal resonance connected individual sin with grotesque consequence, a strategic maneuver mapping morality with personalized transgressions. Hence, hell was not random chaos but meticulously organized, each torment a bespoke reminder of moral failings. By instilling this deeply personal aspect, the Church framed life as a series of choices with eternal weight. To the medieval soul, life was a pilgrimage with death not an end but a treacherous turning point. Holy sight journeys were preludes to the soul's ultimate destination, between salvation or damnation. Religious texts depicted this journey fraught with peril, hell lurking as a backdrop to earthly decisions. This spiritual pilgrimage influenced life's trajectory, prompting vigilance against spiritual bandits along life's road. Hell loomed as both destination for failures and as a moral compass guiding righteous living. For some, the anchorites, the threat of hell inspired strict asceticism. These devoted lives within cells aimed at spiritual purity, rehearsing death to avoid hellish fate. Their existence mirrored medieval fears and faith, offering lives stripped of worldly distraction in exchange for spiritual girding. Anchorites faced hell's spectre head-on, internalizing imagined torments to shield against temptation. Their wisdom was sought after, embodying a profound dedication to salvation amidst worldly sin. Stories like Dante's Inferno vividly etched hell into cultural literacy. Dante's mapped underworld intertwined theology with storytelling, blending morality and entertainment. Epic tales transformed sermons into experiential narratives, offering medieval audiences parables layered within engaging plots. Through these narratives, hell's imagery transcended dogma, rooting itself in the collective consciousness, blending church orthodoxy with visceral folklore. Death was neither abstract nor distant. It daily brushed medieval life's fabric. Artistic depictions like the Danse Macabre served as grim memento mori, ubiquitously reminding of life's fragility and the judgment that followed. Death rituals, prayers for the dead, and memento mori underscored divine accountability. Communities, invested in the fate of their souls, viewed hell not merely as doctrine, but a looming reality, shaping temporal lives with the weight of eternal consequence, and believing that fear was the intrinsic price of faith. In the twisted tapestry of medieval life, disease was more than a mere ailment. It was perceived as a judgment from the heavens. Sickness served as a mirror, reflecting one's sins on the flesh. In a world where the physical and spiritual realms intermingled seamlessly, an individual's health was a direct reflection of their moral state. Minor misdeeds and grave sins could manifest as fevers or sores, reminding the living of their fragile nature and the divine balance that governed their existence. The idea that one's spiritual decay could ripple outward, affecting families and communities, wove a tight, vigilant web across villages and towns. Biblical lore breathed life into this perception. Tales of plagues and diseases as divine reprimands supporting the belief. Leprosy stood as a particularly feared spectre, believed to mark sinners spiritually as they decayed physically. Lepers were cast out, treated as embodiments of sin itself, showing the entwined nature of health, morality, and divine will. The plague, especially the terrifying shadow of the Black Death, mirrored the collective sin of communities, seen as a wrathful God wiping his slate clean. Such interpretations did more than frighten. They offered explanations and a means to cope. aligning earthly suffering with divine schema, guiding moral conduct with a shadowy finger. Leprosy embodied divine retribution, its physical marks perceived as stamps of internal corruption. As Hansen's disease scarred and disfigured, medieval society saw it as moral failure brought to light. Lepers, exiled to desolate colonies, represented the stark boundary between health and sin. The Church, with its solemn rituals like the Lepers' Mass, declared sufferers dead to the world, intertwining spiritual lack with social isolation. Yet, in this stark condemnation, the afflicted occasionally found charity, a chance for the pious to reflect on their own sins through acts of mercy, revealing the complexity of health and spirituality. The Black Death consumed Europe in the 14th century, a monstrous testament to divine displeasure that devastated cities and villages alike. It tore through the social fabric with indiscriminate ferocity, spurring fevered religious processions. Flagellants whipped themselves raw while penitents walked, barefoot and remorseful, in desperate attempts to earn mercy. Wicked society, it seemed, had stirred God's wrath, and whispered prayers filled churches as the faithful sought deliverance. Yet this dark age of despair also fueled paranoia, igniting injustices against Jews and suspected witches, fueling fires born of fear. In this era devoid of modern understanding, healing was as much a spiritual endeavour as a physical one. Remedies were steeped in faith, with pilgrims flocking to sites housing sacred relics said to heal. Prayers rivaled herbs and bloodletting as treatments, each intertwining the divine with the physical. Relic shrines such as those honouring Saint Roch swelled with hopeful souls, seeking both bodily cures and spiritual redemption. Pilgrimages offered dual salvation, journeys of faith transforming personal strife into spiritual surrender. Bloodletting emerged as a widespread practice, rooted in ancient humoral theory, seen almost as a sacred cleansing rite. The practice, both medical and mystical, aimed to restore balance among the body's humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Barber surgeons wielded blades as both healers and priests, cutting away impurities of the soul, along with excess blood. Despite the questionable merit of such practices, they symbolise the deep connection between body and spirit. Superstition infused medical understanding, and charms and rituals wove a safety net against the intangible forces that governed health. Amulets and chants underscored the belief in unseen protections, and medicinal herbs were often coupled with prayers. Astrology even guided timing for treatments, a testament to the medieval blend of cosmic belief and earthly health. These practices, dismissed by modern rationality, were essential to those who dwelled under the spectre of death, offering a measure of control in an uncertain world. Disease, seen as a divine trial, tested faith's resilience, serving as both crucible and purification. Those gripped by illness were counselled to embrace suffering as a noble path to spiritual purity, a way to draw closer to divine grace. Religious texts depicted illness as a battlefield where faith battled despair, a test with eternal consequences. Acceptance, patience, and piety during affliction were lauded as acts of virtue, capable of tilting the spiritual scales in their favour. Amidst this backdrop of disease and despair, religious healers stood as beacons, channeling divine mercy. Saints and clerics, considered gifted with miraculous powers, undertook cures that transcended the physical realm. Pilgrims flocked to shrines dedicated to healing saints, seeking solace and salvation through their intercession. These legendary healings became woven into the fabric of belief, offered as evidence of the divine's role in human suffering and redemption. Finally, the danse macabre captured the era's essence. Death as the ultimate equalizer, an inevitable procession uniting all, transcending class and piety. This macabre dance, depicted in chilling murals and haunting verses, whispered a profound truth amid rampant disease. Life was fragile, death a certainty, and divine judgment ever looming. In acknowledging death, medieval society embraced humility, accepting mortality as a path to redemption and spiritual vigilance. If this strange little slice of medieval life stirred your curiosity or your stomach, give us a like. And if you're hungry for more gritty tales from the dark side of history, subscribe to Medieval Grime. We serve our history smoked, salted, and a little bit cheeky. Thanks for watching, stay grimy, and we'll see you next time by the fire. In the medieval mind, life unfolded as a tapestry, rich with divine signals. The rustle of leaves, a bird's flight, each held whispers from realms beyond. Omens threaded through daily life, earthly events dressed as cosmic messages, foretelling great joys or lurking doom. A raven circling the sky could spell disaster, a sudden storm, divine displeasure. Chroniclers, bearing reverence, documented these signs with devotion, treating nature as a celestial script. Each omen was open to interpretation, its meaning discerned by those who claim the knowledge. The wise women, monks or village elders. These interpretations served dual purposes, commanding respect for life's unpredictable patterns and reinforcing social hierarchies. If a king received a favourable omen, it legitimised his divine right. A rival's ill sign was convenient fodder for propaganda. In embracing these omens, medieval people found a way to navigate the uncertainties of life, preparing for famines, wars, or plagues through more fervent prayers and cautious alliances. Dreams, meanwhile, bridged the earthly and ethereal, offering midnight visitations that transcended ordinary waking life. Sleep opened gates to mystical realms where dreamers could glean truths, sage advice, or dire warnings. Church fathers like St. Augustine mused on dreams' symbolic depths, while common folk recognised their potential for comfort and terror. A child could be counselled by a departed relative. A villager might receive a vivid premonition. These dreams required wise interpretation, often sought from clergy or matronly seers. Folklore intertwined dreams with belief in spirits, where certain animals or actions held meaningful definitions. A dream of drowning suggested being overwhelmed by sin. Flying signified longing for spiritual liberation. Dream manuals became guides to these nocturnal narratives, with interpretations shaping decisions, guiding paths through life's intricate tapestry. In medieval society, liminal spaces blurred the lines between known and unknown, with crossroads as intersections not just of paths, but of destinies. These places were believed to throng with spirits and occasional sorcery. At such thresholds, criminals were sometimes executed, hoping that spirits might claim their souls. Twilight, too, was a bewitching moment where daylight and darkness briefly coexisted. Practice and caution ruled these spaces. For practitioners of esoteric arts, they were ideal for invoking spirits, while travellers left offerings to ensure safe passage. Mirrors, reflecting far more than physical form, were believed to capture the soul or roll a glimpse of another world. Such beliefs demanded that life be lived within the delicate dance between daylight clarity and shadowed uncertainty. Magic was more than fairy tale whimsy. It was a grounding, pervasive thread woven through life's seamless fabric. it differentiated into realms of natural magic, the earthy domain of plants and herbalists, and demonic magic, dangerously near heresy. When medicine faltered, spells or charms inscribed with Christian invocations stood in hope of healing. Farmers observed lunar phases for planting, while nobles wore amulets against courtly machinations. Magic was neither irrational nor fantastical. It was a rational approach to life's unpredictable moments. Superstition steeped every step into a world where reality and spiritual expanses danced as one. Ordinary encounters blurred with extraordinary possibilities. Place and action felt painted with divine or devilish strokes. Community recorded mysterious occurrences in official rolls and resolved disputes with one eye fixed on superstitious sway. Nature joined in this chorus, with events interpreted as divine or infernal expressions. Weather shifts, animal behaviours, even brief appearances of heavenly bodies became narratives readable to those attuned to their language. Such signs forged a triad of understanding between people, land, and the spiritual realm. A triad vital in determining agricultural cycles, economic strategies, and ceremonial practices. Even children were sometimes seen as conduits for prophecy, born under unique stars or wrapped in peculiar signs. They were often revered or feared for their potential gifts in foresight or healing. These children sparked local lore, standing as living tales of human-divine interplay, embodying the celestial intertwined with the everyday. Ghostly visitations added another uncanny layer. The dead visited the living through dreams or eerie encounters, bearing messages or pleas from purgatory. These spectral appearances weren't just stories for long, haunted nights, but tangible events documented by church records and personal testimonies. They reinforced a belief in an economy of souls, alive with exchange between the mortal and eternal. Even the gentle space of water, pools, wells, streams, housed reflections and whispers of otherworldly presences. Tales of water scrying filled folk traditions, where individuals sought guidance or insight from reflective depths. These encounters whispered not only community practices, but also personal rituals, drawing individuals into introspection beneath star-kissed skies. Living in this medieval world meant navigating a realm richly inhabited by symbols and signs. Each decision, enveloped in this cosmic weave, attained a purpose threaded with faith and caution. Medieval. People embraced tales spun from nature and superstition, their lives a colourful dance against a backdrop of mysteries, welcoming an array of divine truths ever sought and warmly embraced. In medieval times, laying the dead to rest was an urgent necessity. With death stalking every corner, graves were dug shallow and families acted quickly, ensuring the departed found peace. This urgency was woven into the fabric of superstition. Delays could result in restless spirits seeking closure or revenge. The practical necessity of swift burials was driven by the fear of disease and the pressing need to contain any contagion the deceased might have harboured. Burials, often conducted within a day, wrapped in simple shrouds, were matters of respect and survival, intertwined with spiritual caution. The Church played a pivotal role, guaranteeing these rites were performed with sanctity, imbuing the ground with spiritual authority, and shielding the living from the menacing possibility of the restless dead. Swift burial wasn't just a ritual, it was a fight against death's disruption. Every soul not properly settled risked becoming a revenant, a soul trapped in limbo, haunting those who neglected the sacred ceremonies. confession and absolution were seen as crucial to a good death, providing purification of the soul to ensure an unburdened passage to the afterlife. Without them, souls risked becoming unshriven, trapped and tormented, wandering between worlds. Such spirits became cautionary figures, their stories serving as moral parables, emphasizing righteous living and diligence in spiritual duties. Encountering an unshriven spirit invoked a mixture of fear and pity, as these ghosts were reminders of promises broken and debts unpaid, reaching out to the living for redress. These tales weren't merely supernatural anecdotes. They highlighted a deeply human element, illustrating that neglecting obligations to the dead could disrupt the fragile order of life. Cemeteries, with their dual role as sanctuaries for the dead and contemplative spaces for the living, inspired both awe and fear. By day, churchyards seem serene, shadowed by memories of loved ones resting under the watchful eyes of saints. Yet, come twilight, they transformed into realms of terror, whispering of spirits seeking final rites long forgotten. The cemetery's uneven mounds and headstones cast eerie shadows, igniting imaginations with thoughts of spirits stirring. These spaces were considered threshold zones, neither wholly of the earth nor entirely divine, prompting cautious respect. Crossing their boundaries at night without the church's blessing was a risk not taken lightly. Ghostly legends proliferated in medieval society, weaving spectral tales into communal narratives across generations. Stories of ghostly nights, banshees, and spectral processions enriched local lore, serving as warnings and cultural lessons. These tales, shared around hearths, helped communities confront shared anxieties about death and morality, reinforcing the understanding that life was temporal. Each haunting tale served to fascinate and admonish, teaching respect for the obligations of the living, while highlighting the consequences of unmet promises. It was within these narratives that listeners encountered a world where boundaries between life and death were thin, connecting them to a collective identity through eerie storytelling. Superstition surrounding death influenced burial practices, architecture, and spiritual beliefs. Medieval Europe's intricate beliefs coloured every aspect of life, especially death rituals. Fear that the dead might return with unresolved grievances dictated protective measures. Coins on eyes, rosemary sprigs for warding, and graves aligned eastward to face Judgment Day. These acts intertwined with spiritual practices, solidifying rituals as sacrosanct protections for all souls involved. Church architecture reflected this understanding with intricate iconography and stonework that warded off spirits while celebrating divine protection. The fear of revenants, angry spirits rising to seek revenge, mandated vigilance. Revenants were seen as corporeal entities hostile due to improper burials or grievances with the living. Communities enacted rituals to ensure these beings remained in their graves, posting vigils or taking extreme measures like exhumation. These vivid accounts underscored community efforts to maintain a balance between acknowledging death's power and asserting life's dominion, reflecting a deep-seated vigilance born out of fear and respect for the spiritual harmony rituals could maintain. The medieval church offered solace and protection against these spectral threats, utilising ritualised exorcisms to guide wandering spirits to peace. These practices involved holy water, prayers and oils, speaking to the church's role as both protector and advisor. In providing such structured interventions, the church reassured communities of divine assistance, embedding intangible fears within theological frameworks and reflecting a cosmic struggle between good and evil. Personal amulets and charms were integral to the common folk's defence against restless spirits, blending folk wisdom and church authority. From blessed beads to herbal concoctions, these items provided tangible relief in a spiritually volatile world. Medieval people reconciled their fear with creative resilience, melding ecclesiastical doctrine and folklore into personal defences, reflecting hope and cultural endurance. Even today, echoes of medieval ghost stories persist, reminding us of our enduring fascination with the supernatural. These tales, reborn in literature and film, urge us to consider timeless questions of life and spiritual obligation, offering continuity and caution in a world shadowed by ancient fears. Medieval imagery, like the Danse Macabre, compels us to reflect on mortality's universality, engaging with narratives that balance reverent fear and spiritual wisdom in an eternal dance of life and death. Medieval folks viewed death not as an end, but as a gateway to a more daunting realm, purgatory. This chilling concept promised that even the faithful, those who avoided hell's inferno, would endure suffering. In this bleak interim, the dead faced torment to cleanse their souls before entering heaven's bliss. Being a good Christian did not spare one from potential centuries of burning. This grim reality suffused medieval life, imbuing it with anxiety and the constant drive to secure intercessory prayers for the departed. For the medieval mind, navigating life was like walking a road paved with fear, seeking any solace to edge closer to salvation. Purgatory was as vivid in the medieval imagination as any earthly town, a crowded place where souls groaned and cried, hoping for earthly intervention to alleviate their suffering. This notion spurred a culture deeply ingrained with prayers, alms and masses on behalf of the dead, altering personal relationships and community dynamics. These ties of shared suffering meant life and death were forever linked. Actions taken on earth resonated far beyond. Thus, purgatory's power was not just in its torment, but in its ability to bind communities, a significant force in the medieval psyche. The roots of purgatory took hold in the 12th century, evolving from early Christian beliefs and scholars' theological musings. It wasn't just a religious staple, but a solution to a spiritual conundrum. How could imperfect souls achieve heaven? The Church introduced purgatory to offer hope, though it's swiftly filled with nightmare imagery. Unlike heaven and hell, which offered eternal reward or punishment, purgatory was a journey of afterlife penance. Theological figures like St. Augustine hinted at it, but it was solidified through church doctrine. Within centuries, purgatory was canon law, a reality cemented in faith, suggesting only the perfectly pure could enter God's domain. In the medieval imagination, purgatory was painted as a realm of flaming infernos, rivers of pus, and landscapes of endless torment. Such images, propagated by church teachings, left a deep impression on the collective psyche. Manuscripts and paintings acted as visual sermons, portraying purgatorial pain with haunting clarity. Disturbing panoramas warned about time stretching endlessly in torment, urging vigilance and preparation for the inevitable. These vivid images educated an illiterate populace, reinforcing the warnings from the pulpit with scenes rich in contrition and potential salvation. This dual imagery of terror and hope bridged the gap between abstract theology and tangible experience. Purgatory's existence reshaped medieval interaction, making prayers and indulgences essential. The living's prayers were believed to affect purgatorial fates directly, creating a spiritual economy of divine negotiation. families prayed fervently, inscribed names in books of the dead, and commissioned perpetual masses, believing such deeds could ease a soul's suffering and shorten its sentence. Indulgences offered a way to alter one's afterlife, promising remission for fulfilling church acts like pilgrimages. While indulgences earned criticism, they reflected an entrenched belief in purgatory's purging fires, urging careful consideration of earthly deeds. Medieval literature abounded with tales of purgatory, blurring lines between myth and reality. Visionary journeys through purgatorial realms offered insight into temporal suffering and final judgment. Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy integrated cultural fears with religious doctrine, presenting allegorical pilgrimages of purification. These stories, woven with warning and wonder, allowed audiences to engage with virtues and vices. Through folklore and poetry, purgatory became a stage for moral guidance, illustrating medieval morality via the narrative. Daily medieval life bore the shadow of purgatory, extending the concept beyond sermons into everyday choices and interactions. It influenced personal decisions and community engagement. Preparing oneself for purgatory informed acts of charity and religious participation. Simple acts seen through the lens of eternal consequence fostered a lifestyle oriented toward readiness and morality, shaping societal structures. The purgatorial consciousness drove an ethos of piety and redemption, where mundane tasks were imbued with spiritual significance by aligning earthly actions with heavenly goals. Monastic orders played a pivotal role in instilling purgatory into medieval culture. Monks and nuns dedicated themselves to prayer, guiding the living in intercessions for the dead. Their intense regimens of liturgical prayer and focus on indulgences demonstrated sacrifice and devotion. This influence extended beyond religious spheres, informing societal attitudes toward wealth and the afterlife. Monasteries acted as intermediaries between heaven and earth, integrating the secular with the spiritual through acts designed to ease purgatory's fire. Class distinction influenced one's spiritual journey as much as earthly experience. The wealthy could commission prayers and indulgences, wielding financial influence over their purgatorial fate. Sponsored masses and indulgences reduced purgatorial time, reflecting the intersection of wealth and spiritual security. In contrast, peasants emphasized community rituals and faith, relying on communal prayers. Class differences highlighted the varied approaches to spiritual pursuits, with eternal concerns affecting societal norms. Purgatory wasn't free from skepticism, setting the stage for future reformation. Critics questioned indulgent sales as manipulative, doubts that laid groundwork for schisms culminating in the Protestant Reformation. Reformers like Martin Luther challenged the notion of transactional salvation, labelling it corrupt. This critique led to transformative religious shifts as Protestant sects abandoned purgatory, seeing it as scripturally unsound. Yet purgatory's impact endures, provoking continued discourse on justice and mercy. It embodied the medieval struggle with morality, urging communities to ponder eternal questions and human imperfection, leaving a legacy intertwined with faith and mystery. In the shadowy corridors of medieval theology, salvation was a rare prize, seemingly reserved for an elect few, while others stumbled and fell into the fiery abyss below. Imagine the path to heaven as narrow as a needle's eye, navigable only by those who pursued lives of unwavering piety. For many, predestination loomed like a darkened cloud, suggesting that God had marked his chosen long before they saw the light of day. Medieval texts reminded believers of narrow roads leading to heaven, veering off into flames as sinners slipped away into eternal damnation. This wasn't a mere journey and metaphor. It was a demanding, relentless daily pursuit. Devout Christians spent their days in a vigilant quest for grace, the spectre of eternal misstep hovering over every action. The medieval Christian needed to do more than just lead a good life. They needed to decode the extraordinary requirements set by the Church. Regular confessions, penance, and stringent adherence to sacraments were necessities rather than guarantees. A dual fear lurked constantly, failing to meet these ecclesiastical demands and dying without the final rites, essentially sealing one's fate in the fires of hell. Saints and mystics documented visions of souls who strayed, their tales serving as cautions against complacency. This harshness underscored the reputation divine judgment had for being capricious, and it signalled the perpetual vigilance necessary to stave off spiritual peril. Temptation was a formidable adversary, an ever-looming presence on this treacherous road to salvation. Life itself was a battle against sin, with temptations whispering sweet seductions, easily leading astray even the most sincere believers. Whether it was the flickering attractions of the flesh, the gleam of wealth, or the vanity of pride, these were seen as challenges laid down by none other than the devil. The ability to withstand these tests was essential. Faltering even briefly could lead to dire spiritual consequences. Monasteries and cloisters were bastions where men and women sequestered themselves to wage war against internal demons, understanding full well that life was but a proving ground. Yet even the austere monastic life was not infallible. Tales abound of monks and nuns battling inner doubts and fleshly yearnings. Despite having renounced worldly desires, spiritual warfare against temptation demanded rigorous prayer, fasting, and abstinence, always coupled with the fear these measures might never suffice. The narratives of medieval allegories illustrated heroes faltering and villains thriving, emphasizing the precariousness of saintly ambitions. Temptation was depicted as a formidable, perennial foe that dared souls to stray from the righteous path. Sin was not merely a moral slip, but a heavy spiritual burden, a tangible weight manifesting through ailments, misfortune, and a paucity of divine grace. The Church held the keys to absolution, recognizing sin as both action and thought, its mortal nature binding the soul unless forgiveness was sought. Repentance was vital, yet fraught with peril, requiring genuine contrition and penance. Certain transgressions, like apostasy or heresy, could tarnish souls beyond redemption through penance alone. Mortal sins severed one's divine connection, promising eternal damnation if not addressed. Venial sins, while lesser, built up, necessitating constant vigilance. This relentless scrutiny ensured a constant need to cleanse a soul weighed down by its own nature. God's judgment was depicted as uncompromising in medieval lore, a truth vividly splashed across cathedral walls in scenes of the Last Judgment. Christ, often portrayed as a stern judge amid fiery sermons, cast a heavy pall over the medieval psyche. The certainty of divine judgment instilled a fear beyond its repercussions, deriving from its finality, a moment when all pretense was stripped away and each soul was laid bare. Heavenly and demonic forces featured prominently, acting as witnesses, advocates, or prosecutors. Some souls were escorted by angels, while others were seized by demons. Such imagery persisted, colouring every aspect of medieval life with a pressing need to live beyond reproach. the Church stood as the gatekeeper of salvation, holding the sacraments necessary for eternal life: baptism, confession, communion. Each step, mediated by Church rituals, promised a structured path to heaven. However, the Church's authority sometimes felt heavy, wielding power through fear rather than grace. The selling of indulgences, a contentious practice, exposed a system that sometimes seemed more about creating wealth than spiritual enlightenment, raising questions about the true purpose of ecclesiastical power. To die without absolution, unshriven, was feared above all else. It meant facing eternity with sins bare before God's gaze, an enduring reminder of life's precarious nature. Amid unexpected death, the comfort of a final confession, extreme unction became a last-ditch spiritual lifeline. Deathbed confessions were as social as they were spiritual. Opportunities to reconcile and settle earthly disputes witnessed by kin and friends. Visitors, familial or clerical, became potential saviours, offering a semblance of order amid existential chaos, each a symbolic hope against an eternal, uncharted fate.